Greetings, children of the screen, your friendly neighborhood nerd scum here once again, and I am joined by...
Logan.
And today we're going to be taking a look at the final volume.
The conclusion.
The conclusion of Crossed. Wish You Were Here, Volume 4. So, if you guys missed my previous coverage that we did on Volumes 1, 2, and 3, there'll be a link for my Crossed playlist popping up right now. That's got not only those videos, but all the Crossed content that I've covered on my channel up to this point, including the backstory for Jackson, one of our favorite characters from this particular series. So, make sure and check that out, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure to subscribe so you can check out the new Crossed content I got coming out every 2 weeks. So, without any further ado...
Get it.
Let's get fucking crossed. Crossed Wish You Were Here was originally published as a webcomic starting in October of 2012, eventually being printed in physical form spanning 4 volumes. The series is written by Cy Spurrier and drawn by Javier Barrino for Volume 1 and Fernando Milik for Volumes 2 through 4, with inks by Gary Erkson, Lee Townsend, and Keith Williams, colors by Juan Mar, and Juan Rodriguez, with lettering by James Reed. Right on, guys. So, in our last video, the B-plot really took more prevalence in that volume over the A-plot, so we covered it first. And while that's not necessarily the case here, I do feel like there are things within the B-plot that the way that we're presenting it will be better if you already know them going into the A-plot, so we're going to once again cover the B-plot first. So when we last left off in our B-plot, Shaky had just gotten rid of Ashok. Teresa, or Adeline, had gone out to find Ashok.
Got caught up with some Crossed.
Yeah, got caught up with some Crossed, and then Shaky came along, killed that Crossed, and then went down with her in like this little alcove. If you remember, I did the whole Lord of the Rings bit in the last video. Yeah, they hide just like that, and more Crossed keep coming, and they hide there overnight, and at a certain point, they start fucking.
Yeah, instead of being 2 scared hobbits.
Right.
Just fuck.
Lord of the Rings would have been a way better movie if it had gone that way, by the way. They really missed out, you know? But anyway, so that's where we last left off, and we pick up in this volume the exact same way. They are in the midst of banging. And in the middle of it, you know, all of a sudden, another Crossed happens by, and Adeline finally comes to her senses, and she's like, stop!
Get the fuck out! Off!
Yeah, she's
out.
Like, yeah, she's
off.
Like, get off! Get out of me! And Shaky's like, but I'm not, I didn't even, and she's like, stop it!
Yeah.
And so they stop, and
God,
they fucking...
Crossed cockblock, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens every fucking time. Every time. Doesn't matter if you're a dude, or a woman, or whatever you might be, if you try fucking in the world of Crossed, it's not gonna end up well for you.
They move on, obviously,
yeah.
And they, her and Shaky find another church, and there's, well, the only reason they got there is because of the kid, right? And then,
right,
and then they find the church, and there's a person there.
Well, there's a priest and a bunch of orphaned children that he's taking care of.
Yeah, the same as like what they found Teresa in the first place. Teresa, so.
He basically doing the same thing, doing God's work. So yeah, that's Reverend Moses White, or as he's called in the story and tells them to call him, Moe. Which we've actually seen Moe before.
A couple times.
Yeah, in the other volumes we often see Sister Teresa and her little group of Crossed with a dude with a big white beard wearing a black, like, witch cloak, and that is Moe, and this is how she initially encountered him.
And she actually likes it there, like, at the church with Moe. And she just, you know, because that's what she was doing before. And Shaky's not about it. Almost jealous?
Very much so.
Yeah.
He does not like that her attention is being taken by anyone else.
Yeah. Was also cock-blocked, so now... Yeah. Still trying to finish what he started. So he goes to what he does. Just shady shit.
Yeah.
Tricky shit.
Adeline is still having her seizures that she has, and one night after having a seizure, Shaky basically, like, undresses her and places her bra inside Moe's coat pocket, thinking that'll get her to, like, want to leave.
Yeah.
And it's unclear whether she just ignores it because of the potential good that she could do there with the kids.
Yeah.
Or if she knows what's up.
Yeah. Or even... Because that almost seems like if she didn't know what happened, that could potentially look bad for, like, on a Shaky side, too. Like, you're undressing her naked, you know, regardless of your intentions. Like, oh, God.
But again, it's one of those things where, like, Shaky's desires and selfishness overrides everything he knows about this person who he is infatuated or in love with.
Yeah.
Call it what you will. Because she's literally the most forgiving person that we've ever seen in any volume of Cross. So, like, either way, it just doesn't work out the way that he wants it to. So yeah, they're sticking the fuck around, no matter what Shaky might try. And again, going to his jealousy throughout these volumes, since we've seen her join up with Shaky and his little group, Shaky's been trying to get her to live a little bit, you know? Trying to get her cigarette, drink, all
sex.
These kind of things, you know? And she's having none of it. But Moe is able to convince her to start drinking some whiskey, like, to help after her seizures and things like that. Help the pain, all that kind of stuff. And one day, while they're all drinking, they run out of booze. So Moe's like, well, you guys stay here. The kids are playing down in the main part of the church. Like, keep an eye on everything. I'm going to go on a run and get us some more booze.
Run.
Some food and stuff like that. So he goes out. Shaky and her continue drinking. And one thing leads to another. And once again, banging. Just
more banging in this volume than any other.
And very quickly within this session of fucking... Teresa has an orgasm, like an earth-shattering orgasm that causes her to, like, yell out. And it just so happens there's some Cross nearby who hear it, and they're like, fucking!
Yeah.
You hear fucking?
Oh my God.
Let's go fuck! Like some fucking college frat guys, they're just like, fucking, let's go! And they head off to the fucking, like, in the direction of that sound.
So as if the Crossed finding out that there's people fucking... It gets even more wild. Shaky is fucking Teresa, and she has a seizure. And he's like, no, not this time. Crossed seizure, it's not stopping me. So he keeps going. And to the point to where, Moe comes back, finds him fucking a seizing out chick.
Yeah.
Tries to stop him, and tries to pull him off, and he's like, this priest isn't stopping me either.
No.
So he just... pushes him off, and he falls, trips.
Well, he pushes him off, and Moe just goes backwards and hits his head on a desk and, like, splits his head open and knocks his fucking ass unconscious.
Which, how do you do any of that and still retain mounting?
Right.
This guy's wild.
Yeah, like, Shaky is a pretty fucked up character. It's all made the worse by the fact that Moe realized that they're Cross attracted to their position, and he, like, rushes in trying to warn them, and essentially finds Shaky raping a woman having a seizure. Because, the sex was consensual. The moment she starts having a seizure and goes unconscious, that is no longer consensual. Okay?
Just gotta clarify that.
Yeah. For as much of blatant sexual assault happens in these books, I feel it is important to mention that if you're fucking someone and they pass out or start having a seizure, that's no longer consensual, okay? I feel like this is a weird way that we have to address that, but it should be addressed. Shaky is now a rapist. But, having said all that, Shaky, like the piece of shit we now know him to be, finishes. And once he finishes, then he realizes there's the sound of children screaming downstairs. So Shaky puts his big boy pants on, and
grabs his gun,
runs the fuck down there to find the two infecteds, a man and a woman, just ripping these children apart with, like, half the children already being infected, and the woman is just naked, grinding on the dead body of one of these children. And Shaky just, like, opens fire.
Yeah.
And, like, takes out both the two adult Crossed and a lot of the children, but as soon as he opens fire, some of the other children fucking book it upstairs.
Towards our friends.
Yeah. So once Shaky, like, kills everything that's alive, he then hears the sounds coming from upstairs. and he rushes up there up to the little hatch of the kind of top floor where they've been staying.
Kind of like a bell tower.
Yeah, like a bell tower type thing. Sanctuary! And fucking... He gets there, and he can hear the noises on the other side, and he knows what's in there waiting for him, and he can't do it.
Sleeves?
Yeah, he just fucking books it, because it's like, on one level, he's like, if the kids are in there, it's already too late. And despite the fact that Shaky is kind of a shady fuck,
Realist.
yeah, and almost if you remember the way in previous volumes that, like, whenever home chick that the Gamekeeper was raping finally killed herself, he got real emotional about it. And this series does a lot of these things where it's like, there are people who act horribly to other people, but in their own minds, they still have this idea that they love them. And number one, Shaky knows there's nothing he can do about it, and number two, he can't bear to even see what's happening to her. So he just fucking leaves. And that
is insane.
It's insane.
It's like a couple panels of just madness.
Yeah, it's insane and it's fucked up, and that is where the B plot leaves us off in this book. God damn.
Yeah.
And over in our A plot, guess what? Things are
just as fucked.
Just as fucked
so
over there.
Bad.
Now, if you remember where we left off in our A plot from the last video, Shaky basically had gone with Jackson to try to kill Teresa/Adeline, and in the process of that, Jackson got infected, blew his own fucking brains out so that Shaky wouldn't have to. Basically just telling Shaky, like, you don't get it. I know so much about the island that if I get turned, y'all are fucked.
Right.
So yeah, basically Shaky can't shoot him himself.
So he does it.
Yeah, Jackson does it himself. So the A plot in this volume picks back up with Shaky heading back to the small group of others who are waiting with a boat for him without Jackson. And one of them is just like, Jackson? And Shaky just gives him a look like, nah, man. Shaky and them go back to Kava, and literally the moment they hit the shores of Kava, all of a sudden they see one of the ships from the fucking fleet just overflowing with Crossed, still on fire.
Fleet. It's the fleet. Just Crossed.
Just coming right at them. And, they're Crossed. They don't give a shit that the boat can't go up to the shore. They go as far as it can go, and then they all just start flooding out of the boat.
Yep.
And we get to see a callback, or a payoff finally, to what they established in Volume 1, where, along the shoreline, they have a pipe that they can pump gasoline through.
Yep.
And so they do that and light it up, and we just see this whole freaking horde of Cross just set ablaze, but still coming at them, and it's not enough. And they all open fire, just taking out as many of them as they fucking can.
Yeah.
But even that isn't enough. There are just too fucking many of them. And finally, in the midst of it, Shaky is just like, fuck, pull back.
Yeah.
Pull back. And everyone's like, what? And he's like, we've got no fucking choice. We can't defend them here.
Even Rab agrees, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. And that's the thing, is in Shaky's inner monologue, he's like, eventually that one poor sod that everyone looks to as the leader has to say something. And he says something, and everybody's like, what the fuck? And then eventually Rab's like, he's right.
Yeah.
He's right. And even, not only is he right about that, but the people in the fleet, who they all assumed would be dead, those people know the island.
Yep.
So Shaky even mentions that, there's no way of knowing, how many of them are already in the settlement. So they can't even go back to where it's safest on the island. They just have to pull back to another area and try to figure out what's going on. So, everybody starts to take off, and Shaky splits from the group. And they're like, hey, where the fuck are you going?
The settlement.
Yeah.
The place we just talked about not being safe.
Yeah.
Going there.
That's where he's going. And he's like, don't worry. I'll catch up with you guys. And Logan.
Yep.
Why the fuck would Shaky be going back to the settlement?
A pen.
For a fucking pen.
Fucking pen.
He is a writer, after all. I feel you, homeboy.
Shakespeare.
Go do your thing.
What does he find at the settlement?
What does he find at the settlement?
The bitch on the boat.
The bitch on the boat.
The bitch we left on the boat.
Yep.
Tabitha.
She is alive and infected as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he even goes to ask, yo, you good? You good?
Right. She's sitting there staring at a drawing of him that she made back before she was infected. So this, there's still something of her in there, and he questions, like, what about the baby? And before he can get a real answer, fucking
Capped.
Quippy McQuipperson Mark that he picked up on their sortie runs
God.
in and is like, fuck, cross, boom, and shoots
Shaky's
her.
like, fuck.
And Shaky's like, fuck, my baby, boom, and shoots him.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And it's just like...
For a pen.
For a pen. All for a pen. And then Shaky just, like, goes back and meets up with the rest of the group during the encounter, but, like... doesn't do shit.
Yeah, he's soulless. Kind of lost it. Little broke.
So he just sits there until the encounter is over, just moping, while everybody else is fighting and dying. So, Shaky is useless. But it doesn't even fucking matter, because as they're sitting here fighting off this wave, they then realize there's 3 other fucking ships from the fleet coming at them from other sides of the island. So they're like, fuck, we have to abandon the island. And they all basically get their little boats and they go and they're going to go find some other small island to hide out on, all except for Mr. Masad, who you might remember in the previous volumes, his son was the one who, like, a bird brought an infected eye, and, like, the dude had to kill his own kid, and ever since then he's been all kinds of fucked up, and his teenage daughter's banging everyone on the island, and...
Probably the most noble thing the guy's done.
And in this whole little thing that has just occurred, his wife also dies.
Right.
So, Mr. Masad's like, fuck it, I'm not leaving. He takes an explosive and stays on the shore as the Cross run at him and blows himself up to try to buy them time to get away. But it's completely fucking in vain. Because once they get out there in the water...
there's more people.
Yeah, Moe. Yeah. Hey, Moe! Just chilling out there in his boats with, like, the soldiers from the fort from the previous volume who are kind of the more intelligent Cross that we've encountered with this group.
Yeah, the main contingent, I guess.
Yeah.
Main group.
And he's just like, nah, go back to your fucking island and wait to die.
Yeah. Or we can fight.
Or we can kill you right now. Take your fucking pick.
Yeah.
But there's more going on here than, like, we're told directly. Mm-hmm. And there's clearly something else going on to the point where, like, this whole attack isn't really to wipe them out. It's to send a message.
So in the previous volume, we got Celine back. And she was just babbling and had a letter for Shaky. So I guess after everything calms down, Shaky decides to decipher it, figure it out.
Yeah.
He, all it is Adeline trying to make contact with Shaky. And so that's kind of where the next kind of bit leads off, is Shaky going to the place to establish contact.
Because basically, like, she leaves him, like, a location that's on the corner of 2 streets, and she says X, and so Shaky goes with Des, the guy who has the young daughter, and they go out there, and at that location there's a building with a giant X on it.
Yeah.
And whenever they go inside, there's also, like, an envelope for Shaky to leave a reply, and, like, on the wall there's a message scribbled where basically she tells him where to go and then asks him when he's going to be there. So he writes the letter because he got his pen. Got that fucking pen.
Damn.
So he writes, when he's going to be there, and then Des goes to lick the envelope, and he's like, this tastes salty. And there's a reason for that. It's got cum on it.
Jesus. Which, is that like a muscle memory thing? Like, why do you need...
Yeah,
I always thought that part was so funny. It's just like, I guess you see an envelope, you put something into it, and you're so used to, like...
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I can think, too. And I mean, like, in fairness, I've sent letters in the mail where they're self-adhesive, but still I instinctively lick the damn thing.
They taste like dog shit.
Yeah, they do.
Not salty, dog
not
shit.
like semen, but they're not good. But yeah, so it is kind of just an instinctive thing where he licks it, and it's got crossed semen on it. So he starts turning, and Shaky has to put him down, and, like, the last thing he says is, tell my daughter that I love her. And Shaky shoots him in the face and thinks to himself, there are worse last words, Yeah. And then Shaky has to go back to Kava and tell this, like, 12, 13-year-old girl who all she's wanted throughout this entire series is for her father to pay attention to her, and he never does. He has to go back and tell this little girl that her dad's dead. And that's fucked.
Heavy.
Finally, after that horrible ordeal and this weeping child, Shaky being the cunt that he is known for being, We finally get to the point where Shaky has to go to the place. It's basically what we saw in previous volumes on that other little island where, like, the rituals were being, performed.
Just up on a hill with a bunch of stones.
Yeah, and it's where Celine was found. In
Right.
that same little area. So Shaky goes over there at the allotted time and finds a walkie-talkie. And when he picks it up on the other end of that radio...
Teresa!
No, actually. That's what you would think, right? All this, like, maneuvering and stuff. You would think so, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, it's actually the Gamekeeper.
Fucking cocksucker.
Because remember in the last volume, we found out that motherfucker was still alive, but he's missing, like, an eye and a foot, and he's all fucked up, but he's still human. And Teresa's keeping him like a fucking pet or something, you know? But we're not really sure why she's keeping him. We're still trying to figure it out. And what it turns out is that, like, she sent Shaky here because she is not in a position to be able to tell Shaky how everything got to this point. But the Gamekeeper can. And so literally, this next little bit is just Shaky talking to the Gamekeeper over this as the Gamekeeper runs him through everything that happened in between when Shaky left him tied to a tree and left Teresa and joined, like, where he met back or encountered Teresa again.
Yeah.
Gamekeeper's tied to a tree. Ashok finds him, cuts him free, and sticks with him. Eventually they ran into Teresa. Ashok gets changed, but she keeps Gamekeeper as a pet for some reason, and while other Crossed are trying to eat him, she refuses to let them, because also within this time, Teresa has joined up with a larger group of Crossed, and through her self-control, basically there's a scenario where they see some people and they run in to attack them, and it turns out it's a trap, and she notices it. And because she notices it and tells them to stop, some of them don't, but when the initial group gets killed, the others realize she knows what's going on. So they start basically following her.
She's intelligent.
Right.
They start leaning into it.
Absolutely. So we even see moments of, like, Moe trying to kill the Gamekeeper and ends up, like, biting him on the leg. So she cuts the leg off, you know, and then gets Moe to fuck her with the stump, you know. But it keeps the Gamekeeper alive because, again, she has another use for him in the long run. And we basically get to see all the little moments from previous...
Any question.
Yeah, really. Any question we had. Like, whenever they're going on the sortie and they start getting artillery shot at them, it turns out that was not actually her plan. That was actually Moe going against her and her having to, like, discipline him. Yep. So we get all these little pieces that we've been wondering about throughout the entire course of the series, which, if I were to go into all of them right now, this video would be about 2 hours long. And also, as I've said multiple times before, I want you to read this book if you haven't already. If you've read it, you know all this stuff. This section is literally about 2/4 of the book.
And it's fantastic.
It's fantastic, and it puts all the pieces in play where you finally get to see how much of Teresa is still there. You get to see how much of her still functions on a higher level than the other Crossed, and how she's been able to wield power over the Crossed and organize them the way that she has. And this conversation goes on so long that it starts to get dark. And all of a sudden, the Gamekeeper's like, "Oh, by the way, they'll be coming soon, so you might want to run."
Still a dick.
Yeah, so Shaky looks up, and sure enough, the Crossed are fucking coming at him, and he takes off. He ends up, like, tripping, and frickin' Moe jumps out with a pickaxe, ready to, like, do his ass in. And so you're like, she wouldn't like that. And Moe's just like, "God, motherfucker." Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
He's so pissed off and goes into his, like, little cross hissy fit spasm, and Shaky gets the fuck away.
Shaky escapes the island, comes back to, I guess it's Kava, right?
Yeah,
it's a section of Kava where they're camping, and goes to sleep, wakes up, and everybody's gone. Just disappears.
Yeah. And he's just like, of course they are. Of course they fucking left.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
They didn't. They've been busy.
Yeah.
And they're not telling him why either.
No,
so
yeah.
It definitely, the tone changes drastically within the community.
Absolutely. Like, whereas before he was a cunt, but everyone was still being kind of, like, on some level cordial.
Yeah, or slightly understanding, like, someone's got to be that guy.
Yeah, but at this point he's completely ostracized, and he sees them planning something and, like, using the old oil refining rig that the fleet was trying to get them to, like, help them get the oil and things of that stuff off of. Right. He sees them planning something and, like, prepping that for something, and he keeps asking them, but, no.
Radio silence.
Gets nothing. Nothing at all from them. And then finally, near the end of the day, finally Rab comes up and he's like,
"Hey man, let's talk."
Yeah, we gotta talk. And Rab is just like, listen, you're a fucking asshole, and you're a cunt, and everyone seems to fucking die around you. But when you tell me that you want what's best for these people in this island, I believe you. Or at least I want to. And that's why I'm sorry.
It's rough.
And then what happens?
They snap his legs.
They fucking crush his legs with a fucking crowbar.
And just leave him like a fish.
Yeah, just fucking leave him there. What the fuck? So yeah, that happens.
Left there.
Right. And it gets dark, and Shaky's sitting there still writing in his little journal, like he does, you know? And then, like, as it's dark, he looks out and he sees just
torches.
A huge line of torches in the water. And he realizes that they're coming. Like, this is it. This is going to be the final fucking assault. And Adeline starts talking to him over the radio. And that's whenever, like, finally he realizes that, like, it's the first time that we see Shaky legitimately still being selfish, but his self-centeredness giving him an epiphany, where he's like, they don't care about any of the rest. They're following Adeline. All they care about is me. So he, like, uses an oar and drags himself to a boat and drags himself out to one of those little, like, rock embankments out in the middle of the water, hoping that he will be able to draw the cross towards him and save the people on the island. He's...
Right.
Finally, at this last moment, he ditches cowardice, and yes, it still comes from a place of self-centeredness, where, like, what's funny about it is that he's so unself-aware that he hadn't figured this out before, or if he hadn't allowed himself to figure it out.
Right.
But when the chips are down, whatever little bit of humanity is still left in him finally is like, fuck it, and he goes out there trying his best to, like, pull him away, talking to Adeline on the radio. And this is also where we find out, because Adeline asks, like, back in the church, where, like, they kissed and Ashok got high and shot the shotgun and all the crossed came, did she actually kill any of the crossed? Which you might remember that before he told her that she absolutely did, and now he tells her the truth, like, no.
Yeah.
You didn't actually kill any of them. And this is where we find out that one of the things that these crossed seem to respect so much about Adeline is that she actually hasn't killed anybody. Like, that's how much control and power and strength she has, where you might think that that would make her weaker in their mind. The fact that she's able to do that has somehow affected these crossed and got them to follow her. But in the course of this conversation, that perspective begins to shift, because one of the next things she asks Shaky is if he loves her. If he really loved her, if he ever did. And he says yes, because of course in his mind, whatever he feels for her, he sees as love. However fucked up we as the audience and the readership...
Sees your fucking...
Yeah, might see it. Because again, these aren't clear-cut, cut-and-dry characters. These are very human characters, and the behaviors of them are very human. People do fucked up shit to people that they feel like and think that they love all the time.
Yeah. And then you have the extreme circumstances that they're in on a regular basis. Like, mentally, these people aren't as normal as we might be.
Right, absolutely. So it's very easy for us to sit here in judgment, in judgment of Shaky, but we have no idea what this scenario is like or what it cause. Anyway, he tells her, yes, I did love you, and I do love you. And then Moe fucking stabs her with a fucking thigh bone.
Yep. Sharpened.
Yeah, a sharpened femur. Just crack, right like that. And basically takes control of the group of crossed. And while all Adeline really wants is Shaky, the rest of them, now that they have a new leader, they're more than happy to go after the rest of the people of Kava.
And then they get up on the oil rig. But that's exactly what the people of Kava wanted.
Right.
That's why Shaky was bait. And
yep.
That was, after that, they were going to go there. But it worked out regardless. For the first time in this issue, the plan worked.
Yeah.
And they blew it to hell. Which left us, after the crazy explosion, a great view of Adeline coming to Shaky with the Gamekeeper, but floating up to Shaky.
Yeah.
Which is just great.
Yeah, like they literally left him close enough to the oil rig that they knew that even though they knew the Cross were after him, even after that, they knew that the Cross would still come onto the refinery rig. And they snuck off in the dead of night.
Yeah.
Just blow that shit up, and then we're just kind of left with, Shaky and Adeline as the people from Kaba fuck off over here. And, like, finally these two characters who have been, like, dancing in circles around each other for all 4 volumes of this book finally meet. And she has a little present for him.
Yeah.
Because this is why the Gamekeeper has been left alive. So that Shaky could kill him. Like, that's what's up. Like, because what we find in this little conversation that's been going on, is as fucked up as she is as a Crossed, and as fucked up as Shaky is just being Shaky, all that either of them really want is to save one another. So, as they're united once again, she comes up and sits next to him with the Gamekeeper unconscious in the boat, and brings a flare gun, and Shaky gives her his journal, and she starts going through it as on loose paper. He finishes the story, and as she reads through it, she rips a page out and throws it away. And finally, when he's done, and she's done, he looks to her and he asks, well, was it a good story? And she responds,
I just counted the words.
Yeah. She didn't even read it. She knows the story. Yeah. She didn't need it. And that's not what this is about. It's not about their story.
Yeah.
It's about their ending. And so basically she tells him, this is your mess. Like, all of this, everything that's happening is because of you. It's all for you and because of you. It's your mess. You have to clean it up. And then we cut back over to Rab and the Islanders.
Sitting with binoculars like a... I don't know, like a spectator.
Right.
Crew.
Just watching what's happening. And from their point of view, we get told that basically Shaky kills the Gamekeeper with the flare gun. And then him and Adeline fuck. They bang once more.
No seizure this time.
No seizure.
No interruptions.
No interruptions. And then once they're both infected, they hold hands and walk out into the current.
And honestly, I didn't realize or even think about it until we started discussing that point there. Like, yeah, Shaky is effectively like a Crossed at the end of this. Like, I don't know why that just didn't click.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
he finally surrenders to the fate that he should have had in that church.
Many times.
Well, and specifically in that church.
Yeah.
Like, when he walked away from her the last time, like, if he had gone up in there, he certainly would have been infected, and they would have been together. Which is really all either of them wants. And so, yeah, they bang, he gets infected, and they walk into the current and let themselves be taken away. And the book essentially ends with something that I could tell you, but even though this is the last thing in the book, I'm just going to read it, because I don't want to fuck it up.
Ooh.
So,
story time?
Yeah. So as they sit there and watch, and as Shaky and her just kind of drift off into the water, drowning, Mr. Massad's daughter asks what it means. And Rab tells her, I don't know, pet. Something, maybe nothing. Sometimes the story's enough, you know? And then the little boy asks if they're going to go back home. And Rab tells him, maybe. Or maybe not. What's important to remember, there are always more islands. And
home is where the heart is.
And the very last thing we see is Shaky's boat sitting on the shore with the ripped pieces of his journal floating in the water and on the rocks. And that is where our A-plot and this series leaves us off.
Dope.
Fucking hell. There you have it, children of the screen. That is the conclusion of both Volume 4 and the series Crossed Wish You Were Here. Wow.
Nuts.
Yeah.
Just...
holy crap. And as always, I want to state that in this volume and in all 4 volumes, there are a lot of things that we kind of glossed over for the sake of brevity, and also because I want you, if you have not read this book, go read this fucking book, okay?
Go read it.
It's really good, and despite a lot of the basic plot elements,
there's so
much more, and even in those things we told you, there are little things, little character interactions, little moments that you can discover for yourself. And in that kind of a way of thinking, Logan, what were some of your favorite things about this book, maybe that we didn't get to delve into as deeply?
Favorite part? Man, just when he first kind of walks up, grabs the walkie-talkie, and it's fucking the Gamekeeper, man. Like, that conversation is one of my, like, what set this series home for me. Like, it just brought, the way they decided to just bring it all together, no loose ends, and just that, the way they talked to each other.
Yeah.
Because at that point, Shaky at a level was the same.
Yeah.
Like, so he was sitting on that walkie-talkie with just malice and, like, anger, and then, like, just listen to this guy, belittle him still.
Yeah. And I think it's worth mentioning, I wouldn't say that him and the Gamekeeper are the same exactly.
No, right.
But they both still have a lot of the same motivations in some ways, and his experience with the Gamekeeper very much shaped him and twisted him further into the person that, where when we start off volume 1 of the series, we see him kind of trying to forget about, and then the events of the series kind of push him further back into that.
Yeah, so where he almost has to, like, embrace it to an extent.
And again, like, the way that sequence kind of goes in and fills in all the gaps and kind of points out to us, like, the questions we had, and kind of, again, like you said, it really, that one conversation in of itself wraps things up in such a nice way and covers so much ground we didn't have time to even just barely dive into it
so
here.
Much.
It's absolutely fantastic, and the way that sequence is paced and written and drawn, the execution of it is just absolutely excellent. It might be the best sequence of the entire series. That is an excellent sequence. For me, in this volume, while that is fantastic, there are a lot of these little moments that for me are just so fantastic. And I'm just going to go through a couple of them real fast before I get to, like, the main other thing that I wanted to mention here. Like, there's a couple of frames in this, a couple of panels. So the panel that we talked about where after, Tabitha has been killed and Shaky kills Mark and he goes and he's just sitting there with all this chaos.
Yeah.
That
just kind of balled up.
Yeah, that one panel is just so fantastic. And the art in this book throughout the whole series has done an amazing job of utilizing body language to tell the story.
Yeah. And
that panel, along with the panel where Shaky is in the B-plot, Shaky is standing underneath the door, the hatch, where he knows that Teresa and Moe are up there with the children. And there's a panel where he just looks down, and it's the moment where he decides to leave, where you can just see, despite, there is like a little caption box that kind of gives you some insight, but you don't even need it.
Yeah.
Like, his body language and his facial expression in that moment tells you everything you need to know, and it is such a fucking human moment.
Yeah.
Like, this moment where a person has made the choice to throw away everything they care about and believe in for the sake of, like, self-preservation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of haunting in that respect. On the other side of things, probably my favorite moment out of this volume in terms of plot and story that we kind of skipped over for time is there's a moment where Skip and his wife and their child try to flee the island under cover of night without telling anyone else to get to their speedboat from the sortie and take off. And the next morning, just Skip and the boy come back.
Yep.
And then later on, one of the smaller ships from the fleet pulls up and has the mother, who is now crossed, bent over the frickin' rail of the front of it and just getting railed by Moe as she screams, like, fuck me better than that Aussie son of a bitch.
Cunt or whatever. And so the shock factor, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, and what really makes this whole thing for me so fantastic, and again, speaking about just like the humanity or lack of humanity that trauma can induce in people, is on the shore, Skip and the child are standing there seeing this, And I believe it's Jackson or Rab, one or the other, who tells the boy, don't watch this.
Oh yeah, I think it's Shaky.
I think it's
actually.
Shaky.
Yeah, he like covers his ears, and then
Yeah.
his wife starts talking, and he's like, "Fuck, cover your ears."
And he's just like, you don't need to see this. And then like the boy goes to Skip for comfort and is like, Dad, and he goes, I'm not your dad. I met your mother when you were just a baby. Get the fuck away from me. Like, now that she's gone, he has completely just
reverted,
checked out. And like, I imagine it's one of those things where like looking at this kid just reminds him of everything he's lost.
and just saw. Like,
Yeah, and just saw. So like, and later on in the book, there's a moment where like Shaky's trying to get the kid to talk to him about the plan they have going on, and Home Dude comes along and he's just like, come on, son. You know, you shouldn't be talking to him. And it's just like, fuck you, dude.
Yeah.
And again, like, that's a really fucked up moment, especially for me to state as something that I like.
Yeah.
But it is, again, so human or so inhuman in its characterization. It's another one of those examples in this book of characters where, like, you might not agree with them or even sympathize or empathize with them in that moment. It is an undeniably human reaction. And it makes the characters very complex and very interesting. And on a certain level, while it's repulsive, it also makes them engaging. Because that is the way that people are, especially when most people, when things get bad...
Irrational, yeah.
Yeah. Like, when things are at their worst, most people are at their worst.
Yeah.
And this book very much shows that. And this book also shows the way that the people around them will be forgiving of that in a heartbeat if it means the slightest amount of comfort. Mm-hmm. And so again, I think that is extremely well executed in that scene and throughout.
Yeah, it's very sprinkled. I mean,
Yeah.
you get clear images.
It's repeatedly throughout the series. And I feel like that whole idea in Wish You Were Here is probably handled better than it is in the majority of the overall Cross franchise itself. Right on, guys. So those are just a few things in this book that we absolutely adored, but because we're going to give our thoughts on the overall franchise, we want to keep it kind of brief. However, as always, I have to be an asshole for a minute, because that's my brand. So, things that I didn't care for or didn't necessarily work out for me in this volume, although the main thing, I have to say, isn't actually something from this volume per se. Now, if you remember when we left off the last volume, the very last thing we get is the reveal that the Gamekeeper is still alive.
Yeah.
And we, even I think in the last video, kind of questioned, like, does Shaky see him? Or, like, what exactly is that? Mm-hmm. But Shaky doesn't see him. When he talks to him on the radio...
Yeah, that's the first realization.
That's when he finds out. So, why did we get the reveal of the Gamekeeper? It totally breaks the structure and the point of view, everything in this book. Up until that conversation with the Gamekeeper in this volume, everything is from Shaky's point of view. So that one moment to give us a, oh shit, reveal at the end of the last volume totally breaks the immersion of the overall series. And it's like, yes, it's a great reveal, but it's not motivated by anything that's set up internally within the structure or within like the delivery of the story and narrative as we've been getting it. So that kind of bothers me. And again, it's a great moment in the last volume, but once you get to this volume and you actually see that Shaky wasn't actually seeing him or anything, it definitely detracts a little bit from the overall solid nature of the series. The other thing I would say, and this is a much smaller issue... Minor issue, is that the way that the backstory... like the B plot is intercut with the A plot in this one, there are times where I don't particularly care for it. Specifically, there is the moment where Shaky gets his legs broken, which coincides with the B plot where Shaky and Adeline are having sex in the church. And I do understand why it's there, and it doesn't even necessarily work poorly. But I also feel like in some ways it actually emotionally detaches you from both moments.
Yeah, because they're both insanely heavy moments.
Yes.
But, you know, like a lot of emotion, right? And then, yeah, you're getting two different feelings at the same time, and it's hard to...
Yeah. And the, like, cumulative effect of it still works for what the book's going for. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily think it's bad, but I do feel that, like, by putting it in there that way, you're missing the full emotional impact of each individual moment. Mm-hmm. So those are really my only real complaints in this book. other than that, it was absolutely solid. Right on, guys, so there you have it. Crossed, Wish You Were Here, the full series. Obviously, we recommend it. That should be clear now after 4 of these videos. But what were our overall thoughts on the series in general? So, Logan.
I mean, I'm biased. This is my favorite one. I mean, I read some of the others, and I haven't gotten all of them, but the way this one reads, it's just so immersive in almost a lot of points, and then it, like I said, it trims everything into a beautiful package at the end. You know, you feel, I guess, full at the end of it, and there's so much shock factor. It's insane. It's the first insane issues I've read of a comic, and I think it's such a good start into it.
It's a nice place to jump on. If you have not read the original story by Ennis, then, like, this is actually a pretty good place to start, because, like, with a lot of these stories, you can just kind of dive into the world with minimal backstory in terms of the virus and how it all happened. But even more so than that, this is actually one of the longest ongoing stories within the Crossed universe.
Yeah.
And again, despite all of my little complaints here and there, it is done exceedingly, exceedingly well. Not to mention the fact that Cy Spurrier had to do it as a webcomic, so the structure is broken down in a much more kind of utilitarian, minimalistic way in places.
Yeah, because it's like, I mean, you look at this and it looks like, I don't know, a few issues, but on the webcomic side, it's 24 issues.
24 issues per volume about.
So he is just kind of throwing shit in there and then, like, getting your points. And,
It's, the storytelling is very economical. It's very well done. He knows how to make a moment matter.
Yep.
And also on top of that, like, Cy Spurrier is probably the most prolific writer of the Crossed franchise, because he does this, which is one of the longest stories, and he also does volumes 2 and 3 of Cross Plus 100, taking over from Alan Moore, which is a fucking hard act to follow, let me tell you. And I have to say, like you say, this is your favorite out of it. Cross Plus 100 is my favorite out of the whole franchise, but this is a close second.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, like, this book does some amazing things. Cy Spurrier's writing in it, despite the things I mentioned, is fantastic. The different artists who work on the book are absolutely excellent, and none of it feels jarring. Like, when you do have a shift in art, it is never so far away that it feels disconnected. Like, one of my big issues, despite the fact that Cross Plus 100 is my favorite, is once you get into Volume 2, where Cy Spurrier starts writing, the art change is so dramatically different. It almost feels like a different book, as much as Cy Spurrier is doing a great job of kind of capturing the same feel of that world that is set up by Alan Moore. The art goes from being very much like what's in this book to being almost like a manga style of artwork.
Interesting.
So it's a big shift, and in this it all feels consistent. Like, if you were just reading through it and didn't really pay attention to the credits, I don't even know if you would notice that the art had changed.
There's just maybe some color palette taste differences, and I mean, but the line work, the facial, I mean, Rab looks the same throughout, you know, like, all the characters look the same. You definitely don't look at them and go, is that the same, you know what I mean, character?
All the
super
characters,
congruent.
all the characters are on model. Like, the anatomy for the book is excellent across all the artists.
Oh, yeah.
The coloring does shift a little bit, but it all stays close enough that, again, you never feel removed from the world that you're in. All in all, just writing, art, you know, the lettering even in this book, everything about it comes together in a very nice, just almost...
4 issues of just good.
Yeah. It is just absolutely awesome. So, yeah, we like this book a lot. I would even go as far to say as we love this fucked up shit. All the way from, you know,
dolphin fucking.
Yeah, all the way from fucking a dolphin in the blowhole while screaming out for his mommy to Shaky.
Mommy.
Yeah.
Mommy getting a blowhole.
Right? All the way up to, like, you know, Shaky holding hands with Adeline as they're both crossed and walking into the water and just letting it sweep them away. I would even, despite all the fucked up shit that happens in this story, I would actually say that it's probably one of the most beautiful out of the Crossed franchise.
Yeah.
It is twisted.
Because there is just a lot of the emotion and it's just, there's a lot there.
And while so many of the books do hinge upon the the relationships between characters. In this book, because we're seeing it through Shaky's eyes, and because his emotions to the characters around him are so specific, and because he spends a long enough period of time around them, we really get to feel those, and because of the length of the book as well, like the series as well, we get to feel those relationships in a more intense way. Yeah. And so when we get to the end, despite what's happening to Shaky and Adeline in that final kind of thing we're told about but not shown, and I think that's a great choice to tell us. Yeah. Because it allows it to remain this kind of like almost twistedly beautiful consummation of their twisted love. And if we had to look at that, it would be a very different story. The horror of it would overshadow the fact that, like, even when they are crossed, the human part of them still wins out in the end. And I think that that's something that most of the rest of this franchise lacks in a lot of ways. So yeah.
Awesome.
Fucking read Crossed Wish You Were Here. Do it. Do it now. Go. Are you still here? Go fucking read this book.
That's awesome.
Right on, children of the screen. Thank you very much for joining us with this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please leave a like on this video. Also, make sure and share it with some friends if they are as fucked up and inclined to like fucked up things as you are. And as I said earlier, if you're not subscribed to the channel, then make sure to subscribe so you can check out all the cross content that I've got coming out every 2 weeks. My next video will be diving into the Crossed movie that never was. So once again, guys, thank y'all very much. I hope y'all all have a good one.
Later.
Nerd Scum. Out.